This is Chris, the Idaho Cyclist, bringing you another how-to video on how to maintain and operate your bicycle. In this video, we're going to be discussing how to operate a pair of Shimano shifters on a road bicycle and a pair of Sram shifters on a road bicycle also. We've got two bikes here, a Cannondale and a Cervelo, and we'll be going over the Cervelo bicycle that has a pair of Shimano shifters on it and how to use those shifters. And if you're like me, I started racing about 5 to 6 years ago, and when I purchased the bicycle, got it home, and I couldn't figure out how to use the shifters. I could figure out how to use the brakes, but couldn't figure out how to shift the bike. I've never owned a road bicycle before, and so I had to go back to the bicycle shop, talk to the salesman, and have them show me how to use the shifters, and hopefully I can save you that trip and embarrassment of going back to the bicycle shop and ask them how to use the bike that they just sold you. And so all on them. And these shifters, if you got a right and a left shifter on the handlebars, and if you just pull back on the large lever, that's what operates the brake. The right shifter and brake lever operates the rear brake. The left shifter brake lever operates the front brake. So right is the rear brake, left is the front brake, and if you just pull back on that, it'll actually squeeze the brakes and stop the bicycle. And you can use one finger or two fingers. It's more commonly, if you're down in the drops, to use one finger on the shifter. If you're up on the hoods, riding the hoods, we use a two-finger method to actually operate the brakes. And now we'll show you how we actually use the shifters. The shifters themselves have two levers, and there's one lever, a small lever, and then there's a large lever. On the right side of the bicycle, the right handlebar, the right lever is used to shift the rear derailleur. The rear derailleur is the shifting mechanism on the rear of the bike. And if you use the large portion of the shifter and just push the large portion of the shifter in, it's actually going to shift the derailleur up the cog set into an easier gear. And that is what we call a lower gear. So as it's moving up the cog set, and the cog set is your rear cog set on the back of the bike, and as it goes up the cog set to a larger ring, you're going to a lower gear, which is easier to ride. If you want to make it harder to pedal, you actually use the small shifter, and you'll click it, and it'll actually shift it down to a smaller cog in the rear, which is shifting to a higher gear. So if you want to make it harder to pedal, you'll click the small shifter. If you want to make it easier to pedal, click the large shifter. And you can click it one click, it'll go up one cog. If you click it multiple clicks, it'll go up several cogs. It can go up 2 to 3 cogs. If you take on the left side, you've got a large shifter and a small shifter. In the large shifter, if you click it once, it'll move the large chain ring right here. It's got a large chain ring and a small chain ring. The largest chain ring on the crank is the hardest to pedal. The smaller one is easier to pedal for going up hills. So I've got a small shifter. If I click that once, it's going to drop it to the small chain ring. Now if I click it once, the large shifter, it's going to move it up to the large chain ring. And the large chain ring is used for small hills, easier hills, and flat ground. The small chain ring is used for large hills going up steep hills. It's Chris, the Idaho Cyclist, how to use a pair of Shimano shifters. This is Chris, the Idaho Cyclist. In this video, we're going to show you how to operate a pair of Sram rifle shifters. We got a pair of Sram rifle shifters on a Cannondale bike here, and the way the Sram operates, similar to Shimano derailleur shifters, but a little bit differently. You've got two levers on this bike, and you got the large levers, and if you pull them back, you can actually operate the brakes. The right lever is for the rear brake, so right is rear. Left finger is going to be for the front brakes. So right is rear, left is front. And when you're in the drops, it's best to operate your brakes with one finger. When you're up on the hoods, this is what we call the hoods, you're riding on the hoods. I typically use 2 fingers to operate the brakes. So that's how you operate the brakes. The Sram 4 shift levers and Sram Rival and Sram Red operate by a double tap system, and there's one lever here that operates the high gear and the low gear. So if you want to make it harder to ride and you want to make the pedaling harder, one small click is actually going to drop your chain down the rear cog set. This is what we call the cog set. This is the derailleur. It's going to be operating the derailleur to drop it down one cog, one ring down, and make it a little bit harder. If you click it another time, it's actually going to drop it down a little bit harder. If you keep tapping it and keep tapping it, it'll eventually work its way all the way down to the bottom. If you want it to make it harder to pedal, the same shift lever, this small shift lever, you're going to click it twice. That's the double tap. Twice is going to move it up the cog set to what we call a lower gear. If you're going up the cog set, raising up here, you're going to what is a lower gear. If you're going down, you're going to a higher gear. A higher gear is harder to pedal, a lower gear is easier to pedal. So if you want it easier to pedal, you're going to make 2 clicks and it's going to raise it up. You make 1 click, it's going to drop it back down. The left shift lever right here operates the same way by a double tap system, but it operates your front crank. The front shifter we got right here, which is on the left side. The front shifter operates the front derailleur, and it operates the chain on the small and large chain ring up front. If you want to make it easier to pedal, you're going to take the shift lever, you're going to click it 1 time, and it's actually going to drop it. It'll drop it down to the small chain ring right here. And if you want it to jump up to the large chain ring to be harder to pedal, you're going to actually click it all the way over really hard, and it's going to move it up to the large chain ring. The large chain ring up front is typically used for riding on flat ground or very small hills that aren't very steep. So if you're starting to go up really steep hills, you want to drop it to your small chain ring, operate 1 click, and it's going to drop it down. A farther click way over, and it's going to jump it back up. And that's how you operate the Sram Rival, Sram Force, and Sram Red shifters. Here we're going to show you how to operate a pair of Shimano derailleur shifters. And on these shifters, you've got 2 shift levers. The large shifters pull back, that's operating your brakes, your front and rear brakes. Your rear brake is operated by the right shifter. If you pull it back, it's going to operate the rear brake. Right is rear, the left shifter is the front brake. And when your hands are on the hoods, use 2 fingers to operate the brake levers. When they're down in the drops, you're going to use 1 finger to operate the brake levers. Now the Shimano derailleur, the brake lever also functions shifting to the side. It actually functions in shifting the rear derailleur on the right side. So your right shifter will operate the rear derailleur here, and it's going to operate your chain, moving it up and down from a high to low gear on your rear cog set. So if you want it to go easier, so to operate the shift levers, the large shifter, the brake lever actually functions as the shift lever 2 on the rear. By moving the large shifter over, it's going to make it go up the cog set, which is an easier gear. So if you want to make it harder to pedal, you'll push this small shifter, which is actually going to drop it down the cog set, which is what down the cog set, we actually call it higher, which is harder to pedal. It's a higher gear. If you want it easier to pedal, push the large shifter up. It's going to move up the cog set right there. You want it harder to pedal, you can shift it several times. 3 times, it's going to drop 3 cogs. Now the left side shifter, you got your large shifter. Pushing the large shifter is actually going to make it move up to the large chain ring. So it's on the large chain ring right now. If I want it easier to pedal, if you start to go up steep hills, I'm going to take the small shift lever right here, click that, and it's actually going to drop it down to the small chain ring. Now if I take the large shift lever, move it over, it's going to operate my front derailleur, and it's going to move it up to the large chain ring and make it harder to pedal. This is Chris, the Idaho Cyclist, how to operate Shimano and Sram rival shifters.